Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about Cobra Kai with Jacob Bertrand. And going back to talking about when you first auditioned for this, because I remember that when you first got sides, that they were originally for Eli, and it was reactions and not necessarily any dialogue in the sides that you got. And I remember hearing you talk about then all of a sudden you got different sides once you got to the audition for Hawk. That all of a sudden you had lines of dialogue, and I was curious if you kind of remembered the experience of suddenly getting different sides and having to pivot and kind of like instinctively figure out how you were going to go into the audition room with these sides because it was different to what you'd essentially been preparing for.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a completely different character, and I, I do have more of a wing it approach to acting, I would say, um, where I don't try to, over memorize, over prep, I like to have the words down just so I can, in the moment see what comes out as like the character. And that was hard because it was essentially kind of a cold read, and I really just had to pick a way to do the character and really commit to that in the moment, and was like, all right, I hope my first instinct is correct on this. And um, I remember it felt like a really awesome challenge, and that I think is the one of the last in-person auditions I've done, just because everything is, auditions are on Zoom or auditions are self-tapes. And um, I miss that exhilarating feel of, getting to go in the room and, it's kind of this cold read of like, all right, what do you got, kid? Let's see what you can do. But it was fun. I just remember thinking it was so much fun to do. And, I've had that happen once before, where you go in with the wrong sides. Like, oh, actually, this is these are the sides. But it was the same character. So this was the first time that I had to do it. And it felt like a completely different character. So, um, yeah, it was just a blast. It was so much fun to get to do.
Yeah, that's so fascinating to realize that with how digital auditioning has gone, that it's been that long since you've been in a physical room for it.
Yeah, I've done it. I've done it a couple of times
Yeah.
since Cobra Kai. But yeah, it's pretty rare to a lot of stuff is just, self tape, get a call back, do a Zoom, do another Zoom, chemistry read on Zoom, which makes no sense because I don't know how casting directors are able to see chemistry on Zoom with people. But um, yeah, I don't know. Definitely a weird turn that the industry's taken for sure for actors.
Yeah. It is. And, kind of going back to what you were describing there of like preferring to work on instinct anyway, was that kind of helpful to you in terms of shooting a show like Cobra Kai? Because obviously, throughout the shoot, you'd be getting the scripts as you were filming. So you'd kind of be learning what Hawk's narrative was going to be as you went. And did that fit in with the way that you prefer to work?
Yeah, I mean the big three, the creators of the show, they would sit us down at the beginning of every season before we started filming, before we really had a lot of scripts, and they would take us through a broad stroke of what our arcs would be for each character. So that was really helpful, knowing just kind of where I was going, but the nitty-gritty was sort of we get a script in that day. All right, let's read it. Let's see what's going on. All right, we're filming that tomorrow. Okay, cool. We're a single cam show, so I mean, most things are now, but it is very, very run and gun. You're filming things out of order. It's, a little hectic. But I don't know. I love it. I love that challenge. I love, we don't get a ton of time on the show. It gets scary or intense when it's for fights because, you're like, oh, I don't want to, heel hook you in the face. Let's try to let's prep this as much as we can. Um, but yeah, it's a run and gun show. They throw a lot at us, but it's a good time. I had so much fun on set.
It's great, and in talking about Hawk a little bit as a character, um, I love that there's this facet of him that he's always willing to throw himself headfirst into things. He's very gung ho and he's like, great, this is what we're doing. We're going to do it and I'm going to fully commit to it. And then he also has this really practical side to him with like the love of coding and what were the things that you found in terms of just playing a character that has like these two kind of what you would assume would be opposing elements, but that actually kind of come together really cohesively in who he is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone who I think in my life possibly I have those sort of polar opposite things. Like I am very outdoorsy. I love being outside. I love hiking, surfing, rock climbing. But at the same time, I'm also very nerdy. I love playing card games. I love Flesh and Blood. I love Magic the Gathering, and um, So I think I kind of know where that comes from to be sort of like an active nerd a little bit. And most of my friends growing up were all CS. They're all computer science dudes. So I kind of know what breed of person that is, I guess. So, going to that wasn't too much of a stretch, too much of a far-fetched idea for me. Because I'd had people in my life that I could kind of pull from. No one as crazy as Hawk, no one as unhinged as him, but that was just more fun because then it just became experimental creativity. How can I be a nerdy psycho?
There's also these aspects of him that we kind of saw in a lot of the growth that you got to capture in your performance throughout the seasons of him feeling a little bit more shy and insecure earlier on, and then obviously his infamous turn into being a bully before he kind of found his footing again. What were some of the levels of confidence that you kind of really found him discovering within himself throughout filming the last season?
Oh man, the levels of discovery. I think Hawk sort of went through his own personal arc where it sort of wrapped up in season five-ish, season four, season five, getting to win the tournament, starting at the bottom, rising up, becoming an ass, going back down to the bottom, winning the tournament, and then, realizing, hey, you can win a lot, but you're gonna lose sometimes. And it really matters. What really matters is how you pick yourself back up and what you do afterwards. And so I think going into season six, Hawk is in a pretty good, well-rounded place. And then, the college bomb drops and, he's not really sure what he wants to do. And, figuring that out with, his partner, his husband, Dimitri, um, was cool and fun to do. It was very stressful. We weren't getting scripts that fast. So not knowing if Hawk and Dimitri were gonna, work it out, go to the same college was so annoying. I wanted them to be together. I don't like, I know it happens in life. It's like, oh, people, they love each other, but they drift apart and that's okay. And that's like, da, da, da. I don't want to see that in my TV shows. I don't want to see that in, I'm trying to escape from that stuff. I don't need to see that in my movies sometimes, but not in Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai was like, no, Hawk and Dimitri have to end up together. That would be so annoying if they didn't.
You wanted them to be roommates at college with like bunk beds together.
Yeah, exactly. They need the bunk beds. That would be so great.
Yeah. I also feel like so much of the confidence that he found in himself kind of came from this sense of like community and the friendships that he built. And, I remember in season five when they had the two dojos competing against each other and everyone at Miyagi-Do like voted for him and he didn't even know that there'd been a conversation. It was like, no, you're going to represent us. And when you kind of like find little moments and beats like that for him as a character, what was like the changes that would instill in him for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that moment in particular really drove home for Hawk that he is where he is because of the friends that he has and because they never gave up on him. And that sort of all culminating in seasons 3 and 4 and really hitting the nail on the head in season five. Um, and I think that's where a big bulk of the growth kind of comes from. I mean, in season 4, when Hawk gets his head mutilated and he's down in the dumps. Dimitri comes back and, doesn't want to give up on him, will not give up on him. And I think him realizing those things that he is where he is because of, the loving friends that he has, because of all of his karate brothers and sisters. That's sort of, the best part of his character and that he has good people around him.
And as much as he had all that growth, Dimitri grew a lot as well, and suddenly kind of like found this confidence, and was able to have a relationship in the last season. And do you feel like that changed the balance of their friendship at all in certain ways?
I think a little bit. I think when, everyone in the show kind of takes a little bit of power, it taints them in different ways. And for Dimitri, honestly, it was the most tame version of, someone going mad with power that has happened in this show. So I'm proud of the kid. He wore the ring for a little bit and he gave it up and he was able to, keep his head on straight. He did a lot better than Hawk did. I can say that for sure.
I feel like the show also did a really good job at not forgetting any of the characters' pasts. With Hawk, even down to the wire, we would still see these little moments and these little emotional beats of him being confronted with the actions of his past and kind of seeing there are consequences to the way that you've treated people, even if you're not treating people that way anymore. Did you find that the scripts and the writing just kind of like naturally gave you those moments where you felt like he needed to be a little bit more self-reflective or, he'd be feeling a little bit of guilt for his past?
I mean, yeah, for sure. I think it is sort of naturally built in just the way the characters would interact, just how people interact, and you can't break that many arms and put that many people into comas without having a little bit of, repercussion. But it's, those things are fun to get to do. And, as much as, you don't want to take responsibility for things, you have to. And that's something that Hawk had to learn pretty harshly. I love the scene where Billy, Johnny Lawrence, they practice leg sweeps on Hawk once he comes back to the good side. I thought that was really funny.
I love that. And also there's the fact that you get to do all these really great large ensemble fight pieces throughout the show. It wasn't just, oh, we did this one time. And the last one that we saw was the frat party where everybody gets involved in that. And I know that you only had a really short amount of time to prep it the day before and to shoot it.
Yeah.
And when you were prepping that, they kind of like set up a room to kind of mimic the space that you'd be filming in with like boxes for like placing the walls. But obviously, that's a little bit different when you're then on location. Because I know, for example, like the ceiling was a little bit lower, so you couldn't
Yeah,
jump as
that's
high as you thought.
yeah.
What was the experience of like prepping for that and then going into the actual location and just finding those adjustments that you had to make on the day?
Yeah, we're always having to do some sort of adjustments just because we have a cameraman who's wearing a camera on his body that's, 400, $500,000, and you don't want to roundhouse kick the, lens that's the same price as a house. So we're always doing little micro adjustments. That fight in particular had the most adjustments we've ever had to do just because the space was a lot tighter than what we were kind of told. There were, the walls were there, but there were giant props on the walls. So that made things a lot tighter. And, the bar was smaller than what we were told. And, I think that's just a part of the game. That's just a part of the fight game or the stunt game. That there's always going to be changes. You always have to plan for things you can't account for. Um, but that's, it's sort of where the magic and the nitty-gritty is. And that's where a lot of the fun stuff comes in, is figuring those things out, problem solving with your um, fellow stunt performer, fellow castmate. It's fun to get to do. I have so much fun in the show. It really is. I came from Disney where, you know, I have a scene where I have to jump over a hood of a car and they bring in a stunt double for that because they're too worried about me spraining my ankle because I'm on a Disney show. And if anything goes wrong, they lose, they're millions of dollars all the time. But for Cobra Kai, they were like, you can do it. Hell yeah. Go crash through that, fall off that thing. That'll be sweet.
I mean, also with those larger group scenes and stunt work as well, there's the fact that there's so much more coverage that the camera's trying to capture. Would you kind of go into those scenes where it was like coverage and you're in different spaces in the framing with the same moves and kind of like the same stamina, or would you sometimes make slight adjustments of like, okay, like I'm gonna go big for this because like now I'm in front of the camera, but I can do it like a little bit differently because now I'm over here in the frame?
Yeah, you definitely save stuff for big falls, flips, whatever you save for the shot you're going to use it in. I might, start a flip or start a big fall, but not send it fully. But just so they have the cutting point of when they do go to that special shot. When you go to do it, you have the lead up to that works really well, but you just absolutely send it on that. And those are fun. It is really cool getting to build up, build up, build up to that shot. You're like, all right, I know it's coming where I gotta jump off this 10-foot tall thing and fall. Um, they're exhilarating. Yeah, it's cool. It's a little bit of the adrenaline junkie in me is stoked whenever we get to do stuff like that.
And the show's so great at kind of making sure that every single one of you had your own distinctive fight styles. And, Hawk's specialty skills were going to be different to what Dimitri would do in a fight. And then obviously the way that Hawk would go into a fight would depend on who is he fighting against. It's like, what moves am I going to do? And so how would you work with the stunt team, kind of like looking at each fight and who his opponent would be and just finding how do I feel like he specifically would approach this each time?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't gotten to do a ton of stunt work before this show. And, for the first 3 seasons, we had Hiro Koda and Janelle Kerfman, and then the back three, um, Don Lee and Ken Bearfield. I would love to do more stunt work in the future. I feel so spoiled because all I know is working with like the most collaborative people ever. and they really try to tailor everything to the individual. And we'll do fights, we'll work them. And then as time goes on, they're like, hey, what's working for you? What's not? How can we change this? How can we change that? And um, getting to do stunt work with a team like that, it just makes you want to give your all. 'Cause you're like, oh, dude, everyone feels so well respected. We're really putting a lot of time and effort into this. Let's make it the best that we can. Um, I'm definitely spoiled in that sense. But it was fun. It was great. I loved getting to rework fights with people, retool things. Oh, this hook feels a little weird. Like, what if, it's a shovel hook or an uppercut or whatever, getting to work on those things with them was sick.
Yeah. I also remember when, Hawk and Dimitri had that fight when it was the flag fight for who was going to
Oh, yeah,
represent
yeah.
the dojo. That was great to see because you kind of knew that both of them could go in on each other a lot more that they did. And how is a scene like that really different? Because it was like there's so much emotional undercurrent to what's happening. And even though the two of them are fighting, they don't hate each other. They still love each other and they're still brothers.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, the that moment really gets sold when, Hawk, I think it's like it was like a spinning back kick or something I do to him, kind of drop him on his ass. And Hawk immediately, oh, I'm so sorry, man. I didn't mean to go that hard. And Dimitri betrays him. He betrays him like a weenie, kicks him off that rock. Still mad about that. Um, yeah, it's hard to see. It's hard to see brothers fight in that way. I, liken it to the Miguel Hawk fight in season 2 when they're at Cardia Creek. I mean, that I think Miguel and Hawk were trying to take each other's heads off. That was, pretty brutal. But this one I liked that was more tame. They have a lot more history. And it just hurt so much more.
And in talking about the tournament in the final season, because Hawk's such a good and such a strong fighter, it was almost surprising at first narratively that he didn't go further. And I know that you had some conversations where you were saying, you were asking the writers, like, well, why doesn't he progress further in the tournament? Um, and how did you kind of like land on this point of actually his motivations are different? It's about getting Robbie to the final, it's about fixing his friendship, and it's not about being the ultimate champion for him anymore.
Yeah, I think Hawk still wants to be a good fighter, and I think the show had already gone through its sort of Hawk era, I guess. And it was just time for someone else to kind of rise up, is really what it is. And slotting more into that support role of like, all right, let's get our dudes in. And just the way the Sekai Taikai was set up is that's kind of how, if you're not the captain, that's kind of how everyone's mindset has to be. You're really just trying to do the best you can to send your dude to the top. And that, kind of selflessness from really who I think embodied that the most was Miguel, who wanted it the most, who needed it the most, or not the most, but I mean, wanted it the most probably. But him really committing and I think setting the tone for the rest of the characters. I think you just needed that throughout that season to really make that work and to drive that message home.
Definitely. What was the experience when you were filming all of those scenes for that tournament in kind of getting to have that moment where everybody's on the sidelines, supporting Johnny as their sensei in that moment? Because it was such a
Oh,
great beat to the story.
yeah, that was so much fun. I remember on the day they were like, all right, we need 2 people to like lift him up when he wins. And I was, we're all lined up, kind of standing there, and I'm in my head just going, oh my God, I want to do that so bad. Let it be me. Let it be me. I just want to be one of the 2. Come on, to be sick. And, the writers are there. And I think Hayden and John were directing, and Hayden kind of just pointed to me and Sholo. And he said, I think Hawk and Miguel would probably be the 2 to do that. I feel like that makes the most sense to them. And my reaction was, "Oh yeah, great, I can do that. Yeah, sounds good." But in my head, I was, "Yes, I get to do it." It was a blast. It is so much fun getting to film that, getting to see Billy get a win, Johnny get a win. It's how the show needed to end. It's what needed to happen.
Yeah. And I know you've always had a really, really big interest in directing. And before you landed Cobra Kai, that your plan was to go to school and study
Yeah.
filmmaking. Um, and that you've kind of always been someone on set who's like followed the directors and kind of like been taking note and kind of really paying attention. And, I know that you've directed a short and you have another one that you've been working on. How do you feel like your time working on Cobra Kai and getting to really observe and watch the directors has kind of grown the filmmaker that you are and that you're becoming?
Yeah, I mean, something that I think has really helped just me right now is watching how this show takes, we are a Netflix show. We have a budget, we have a lot of people, we got a great team, but we do work with a pretty limited amount of resources, and just getting to watch a crew make what we're making on the limited resources that we have, it's pretty eye-opening to see, oh, these are where you can kind of cut here, this is where you can cut there, trim the fat along that. And it's cool to see how it functions at the top level, or not the top level, but at a very, very high level. That's been great, and just getting to pick the brains of the different directors that we have on. And really, I think the biggest thing that I've tried to learn from on Cobra Kai specifically was how we shoot fights, because that's so different than anything else. It's so different than how you shoot dialogue, and being able to sell stuff, cheat stuff, talking to the directors about how they're prepping for different fights, and this, Don Lee and Hito and Janelle and Ken, and talking to them about, their process is super eye-opening. It's cool. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think film school is amazing. Wish I could have gotten to go, but on hands learning is by far the best way you can learn. And I'm just really excited to get to, try to throw my hat in the ring, and try to make stuff, that's, my vision, if you can even, call it that. It sounds so posh, but yes, this is my vision. This is how I'm going to be doing this. But it'll be fun to, sort of dip into that and try to, you know, direct and write and, you know, have fun on the other side of the lens.
It's great. And with Cobra Kai, when you look back at where Hawk started and kind of who he was at the beginning and that whole journey that he's been on over these seasons, what's some of the growth that you're proudest of him having accomplished as a character?
Oh man, I mean, I think taking his pride out of his life to the degree that he has, realizing that he is where he is because the people who are around him, who have supported him, that, I think it's like season 3 or 4, maybe, yeah, 3, I think it is, where, Johnny kind of comes up to Hawk in the school after, Miguel dies, and, his back is broken and all that. And he says, you didn't do this on your own. Like, Kreese didn't give you this shit. I did. I fucking made you. You're here because I gave you a shot and I cultivated you. And I think him slowly realizing that through the seasons, that it was not just him. He's not some god that was able to get a mohawk and start killing everybody. That it really is through the love and power of friendship. It's really what it boils down to.
It's great. Well, I've loved watching his entire trajectory and your performance on this show. So congrats on everything, Cobra Kai, and thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. You rock.